What is Joe Mixon's fantasy football outlook for 2020?
Right here.
A little bit about Joe Mixon's outlook for the 2020 season. So, Johnny, looking at Joe Burrow coming in, look at the changes that they've done to the line. And then we saw this stat that's over here on Reddit, posted by DFS and Donuts. I like that name too. Joe Mixon finished with 313 touches, 1,425 yards, 8 touchdowns. Not sure, he says, if his touchdowns will increase much either in 2019. Mixon had the second most rushes inside the 5-yard line. That's 16, but he only scored on 4 of those carries. So he wasn't able to convert a lot of those, but he did have some awesome numbers. Johnny, what is Joe Mixon's fantasy football outlook for 2020?
For Joe Mixon, you're going to get a lot of people who have like that sour, bitter taste in their mouth from Joe Mixon, similar to David Johnson, if I could talk this morning, similar to David Johnson, where people had these high expectations of these running backs. They drafted them. They didn't pan out, or certainly pan out to the extent of the draft capital that you invested in them. So then people start retracting, and then they get bitter towards a player. Listen, you look at what he is getting, and you want the guys who are going to get the touches in fantasy football, because the touches are going to lead to opportunities, and the opportunities are lead to the scoring fantasy points. So when you're telling me a guy is getting, over 250 carries in a season, and then you're adding on an additional 50 targets. Now I understand that. Listen, Joe Mixon has not been the biggest wide receiver out of the backfield there for the Bengals, but he certainly can do that. Like, if you go back and watch his Sooner tape, like he was catching balls out of the backfield. He can do that. So you're looking at a team who's getting Joe Burrow this year. They've added offensive weapons. This is Kelly's second year, or Taylor's second year in the league as head coach. So they'll have this offense a little bit more, he'll know what to do. Let's remind ourselves he came from the LA Rams, Sean McVay coaching tree, where they like to spread things out. I think they'll be able to do it now because they have the wide receiver options. With AJ coming back, they drafted T. Higgins. They've got, John Ross started to show signs. And so if you add all those pieces up, you add the fact that they're getting back a first round offensive lineman that got injured last year. All these pieces are showing an uptick for Joe Mixon, and I think that Joe Mixon he'll definitely be a top 10 running back for sure. He is my favorite running back to target at the end of round 1, because I think he is falling too far to me. Like, I seriously would consider taking Joe Mixon over Alvin Kamara, and that's the truth. Ooh. Yeah, that's the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's sound logic there. If we look at actually Mixon's the year before last, 2018, he had a higher yard per carry. He had higher touchdown rate. So I think that's what we can look on. It's not like he is destined to be the guy he was last year as far as only running for 4.1 yards per carry and only getting the 5 touchdowns as mentioned. I think he's closer to a guy that's going to get volume and should settle back into that median of, 8 to 10 touchdown range and a 4 to 4.5 yards per carry, which is going to be really nice for a guy, like you said, that's getting top 5 carries in the NFL right now, behind an improved line, with improved or, should be improved quarterback play, with a healthy offensive weapons around him that should give him more opportunities to continue to rush the ball. Mixon is poised for a good year, still a good value. We could have easily said, even though he's going late first round, early second, that he is one of the top 5 values we're going to talk about today. But he's definitely a guy that should be targeted, and his outlook looks really good for 2020.
Not only that, but think about this too, dude. Joe Burrow he was passing to his running back in CH all the time in college, so it will translate into the NFL. So this is going to be
we talk about what assists a young quarterback: throwing to the tight end, throwing to the running back, doing the easy dump off screens that you can get the ball out of your hands quickly and avoid the pass rush.
Yep.
So I think he's got a good outlook.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Whisperers podcast. You can hear more from John and Travis on Google Play, SoundCloud, and iTunes. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at TF Whisperers.